there's lots of other ways to think about this idea of how thinking about the question gets us to change our mindset and therefore take a different actions. Let's take another example. Imagine I asked you, how often do you floss your teeth? And I gave you a scale from 0 to 9 times or more a day, or I gave you a scale from 0 to 9 times or more a month. And I gave you one or the other of those scales. If you got the top scale, what would you do? You would answer somewhere on the left. If I gave you the bottom scale, you'd answer somewhere more to the right, unless of course you never floss, in which it would be identical. And now what? Now you would not just stop there, you would infer something about your own hygiene habit. If you got the top scale, you would say, whoa, my goodness, look at me, I'm at the top, I'm at the left side of the scale, I'm not doing very well, I'm below the norm. And if you got the bottom scale, you would say, look at me, I'm at the top of my game, I'm way above the norm, nobody is better than me, basically. Now again, if we did this and let you go, your opinion, understanding, thought about this will basically decay over time. But what if just after filling one of those scales, I asked you, hey, I have a number here, should we call a dentist, should we call a hygienist, should we schedule an appointment for you? Now, your change in your momentary mindset could be translated into a decision. And that's indeed what happens. If you got the top scale, you would say, let's call now, let's make an appointment. And if you got the bottom scale, you would say, well, no need to worry, I don't need to meet any doctor or any dentist. Now, I'll give you another example for the same thing. Imagine I was your financial advisor, and I asked you to think about retirement. And in one case, I would ask you to think about the financial crisis and the days in which you lost lots of money and how miserable those days were. In another case, I would ask you to imagine how it would be like to retire to the Bahamas and golf and fish, whatever you want. I kind of painted a nice picture of that. If I put you in one of those two mindsets, and then I asked you, how much risk do you want to take in your investment portfolio? You would make very different decisions. If I just told you about all the misery of losing money, you would say, I don't want to experience this again, let's be safe. If I talk to you about all the wonderful things that you could do if you had enough money to retire, you would be willing to take much more risk. Now, if I did these exercises and stopped there, nothing bad would happen because you would forget over time. But if I took those two very different opinions and now optimize your portfolio based on that, now I could change your outcome for the next year in terms of your returns based on these arbitrary starting points. And if the next year you came to see me, would we start from scratch to thinking about your investment strategy? Of course not. We would look at what we did last year. We take that as a starting point and behave again and again and again. And this is how a momentary mindset can translate not only to a decision, but to more and more and more decisions over time. There's another way to think about the extent to which we don't know our preferences and how the choices that we're being presented with are going to influence what we value. So consider the following case. Imagine I'm offering you a great deal and I say, hey, I can send you to 1 week for vacation in Rome. All expenses paid, I'm paying for flight, I'm paying for hotel, I'm paying for breakfast every morning, or I can send you for a full paid, prepaid vacation, I'm paying for everything to Paris. And I say Rome or Paris. Now some people have very strong preferences. They love Rome, they hate Paris, the other way around. But for most people this is a very difficult decision. Which one do you want? Which one is better? Now imagine I added another choice to the set. I said free vacation in Rome, free vacation in Paris, or having your car stolen. Now, it sounds like a crazy idea, because in what universe adding an undesirable option like having your car stolen would influence your choice between Rome and Paris? It turns out there is a version like that. By the way, if you just add having your car stolen, nobody wants that. But there's another version which we call Rome minus. And Rome minus is just like Rome. Is a full week in Rome, all expenses paid, flight, hotel, breakfast every morning, but the breakfast doesn't include coffee. You want coffee, it's €2.50 and you're on your own. Now think, what does this Rome minus does to the choice set? Here is what it does. When you think to yourself, when you say Rome versus Paris, you say they're so different. Different art, culture, language, romance, food. Not sure. Now if you say Rome without coffee in Paris, I'm not sure either. It's not as if the coffee is a decisive factor. But when you have Rome without coffee and Rome, that comparison is very, very clear. Rome with coffee is much, much better than Rome without coffee. And what happens now? As Rome without coffee is entering the set, it makes Rome with coffee looks better. Not just relative to Rome without coffee, but also better than Paris. And what you can see is that when we add Rome without coffee, people start choosing Rome. Now, it also works for Paris. You add Paris without coffee, people start choosing Paris. And what this suggests is that when we add an option that is not desirable, it can nevertheless change how people view the other options. This is the relativity principle. It's the contrast between Rome minus and Rome that makes it so attractive. Here's another example for this. Quite a few years ago, one of my friends pointed out to me that there was this website of The Economist, and they had this offer. And he said, look at this offer. I looked at it, and it was really quite interesting. And here's the offer. What would you like? Would you like to get a subscription for theeconomist.com for $59, the electronic version, the print version for $125, or both of them for $125? Now, when you read this, you say to yourself, why is the middle option there? What possible thing could it do? Right? Why would anybody want that? Now, by that time, I already did all kinds of research on this decoy effect, on the, we call it the asymmetric dominance and the decoy effect. So I was really happy to see this ad, and I called The Economist. And I have to say that I was really hoping that they would say, oh, Dan, it's you. We're so happy. We're so glad you called. We read one of your papers, and we tried to implement it. This was not the case. In fact, I don't think they knew about my research. And they passed me from one person to another, to another, to another, until finally I get to the person in charge of their website. And I said, could you please explain to me, where did you get this idea? And would you be willing to do some experiments with this? And he said, of course, I'll get right back with you. And this was many, many years ago. I never heard from them again. So I decided to do the experiment myself. I gave this particular sheet to a group of MBA students and basically looked at what they wanted to choose. And here is what we got. Few people wanted the online version. The vast majority wanted the combo deal. And thankfully, nobody wanted the wasted option in the middle. Nobody wanted to pay the same amount for less. Great. Now, here's the thing. If you had 3 options and one of them had 0 market share, would you keep it? Of course not. So for another group of students, I kicked the middle option out. I just presented the top and the bottom. And what happened now? The market share reversed. The thing that was the least desirable became the most desirable. The thing that was the most desirable became the least desirable. Why? Because the middle option, while being useless in the sense that nobody wanted it, was nevertheless important because it defined the framework by which to evaluate these options. Think for a second. Is $59 for the economist.com for the online version is a good deal or a bad deal? How would you know? How would you think about it? Is the $125 for the combo deal a good deal or a bad deal? Compared to what? 60 lattes? 50 lattes in Newsweek? Or how is the comparison really going to happen? So the middle option, while nobody wanted it, gave a framework to think about the 2 options. In fact, it gave you a framework to think about the bottom option. Relative to $125 for the print version alone, $125 for both seems like a good deal. In fact, it makes it look like you're getting the online version for free. And this relative comparison makes something looks much, much better. So there are 2 things here. The first one is to suggest that we just don't know how to evaluate things. It is really hard for us to evaluate things. And the second is that because of that, options that we don't even choose enter into our comparison mindset and can influence how we view the options, and relative advantages end up being important, decisive advantages. There's one more very interesting aspect of relativity in prices that comes from Bob Frank's work and his book, The Darwin's Economy. And in that book, by the way, Bob Frank argues that the real godfather of modern economics should not be Adam Smith. He should be Darwin. And he gives the following analysis. He said, imagine that you're a lion seal, and it's the mating season. And what happened is, for lion seals, is you want to be the biggest one of the lot, because the biggest lion seal get all the females, or virtually all the females. The second one gets a few, but it's mostly about the biggest lion seal gets all the females and all the ability to reproduce their genes. So what happens in this world? You want to be slightly bigger than other lion seals. Now, do you care how big everybody is? No, but in relative terms, you just want to be slightly bigger. Now, the reality is that with lion seals, this is a really sad thing, because as each one of them struggle to be slightly higher, slightly bigger than the other, they become incredibly large. And they are so large these days that they die at young age from all kinds of heart problems and vascular problems, and they also sometimes crush the females when they copulate. And if you think about it, it's a race to the top that is perfectly sensible for each lion seal, right? If you're the second largest lion seal, you're not going to rest until you become the biggest, but nevertheless, it's destructive for the whole environment, for the whole ecosystem. My grandfather was an economist. He used to work for the UN, developing tax system for developing countries. And he explained to me once when I was very young, what is inflation? And he said, imagine that you're in a concert, a musical concert, and everybody's sitting and everybody's enjoying the music. All of a sudden, the people in the front row stand up, and then the people in the second row have to stand up, and the people in the third row, and soon enough, everybody has to stand. And at the end of the day, everybody sees just the same as when they were sitting down, but everybody is more uncomfortable. And this was his explanation of inflation. And if you think about it, that's what happens. When everybody just worries about their own relative position, there's a chance for destroying the whole ecosystem. And Robert Frank also shows that this is what has happened, one of the things that happened in the housing market in the US. So imagine that you're a young couple and you have a couple of kids and you want your kids to go to good schools. If you're in the US, how do you get kids to go to good school? You go to a good neighborhood, because neighborhoods are the ones who are funding local schools. So the easiest way to get into a good school is to go into a good neighborhood. So what you're doing, you're trying to push yourself into get to the best neighborhood you can. You're kind of extending your economic ability to the highest amount you can in order to get to the best district that you can. And now what you have done, that, what are the consequences? As he shows, there's increased domestic violence, divorce, and of course bankruptcy. And here's the notion. The moment we create a system where everybody tries to just fight a little bit harder, to get just a little bit above, we can give people the ability to destroy not just themselves, but the whole ecosystem. I want to show you one more example of this. This was a study with physical attraction. Often when you see somebody face to face, you have an immediate feeling of whether you're attracted to them or not. So we wanted to study whether the same effect also happens in physical attraction. So we took pictures of students. In this illustration here, I'm not showing you students, I'm showing you computer images, but in the experiment they were students. And we asked people, who would you like to date? Would you like to date Jerry, or would you like to date Tom? And for some people, we took Photoshop and we made Jerry slightly uglier. And we asked people, who do you want to date? Jerry, ugly Jerry, or Tom? And other people, we asked, do you want to date Jerry, Tom, or ugly Tom? And the question we had was whether ugly Jerry would help disproportionately Jerry, and would ugly Tom disproportionately help Tom? And this was indeed what we found out. Now, these results have two very straightforward, simple implications. The first one is that if you ever go bar hopping, who do you want to take with you? Who is the ideal wingman or wingwoman? Now you know. It's somebody who is similar to you, but slightly less attractive. That's kind of the optimal approach. And the second thing is that if somebody else asks you to come with them as their wingman or wingwoman, now you know how they think about you. I should point one more thing. I got a letter from this woman at Cornell who said that after reading this information, she started using this approach. She started taking her roommate with her because she thought she was a slightly less attractive version of her, and she went with her from party to party to party at Cornell, and it worked very well by her accord. The only thing was, after a few months, she decided to tell her friend why she was carrying her with her to all these parties, which of course backfired. So if you do this trick, don't tell the person about that.